Chapter 21. The Countess de Winter. As they hurried on, the Duke heard from D'Artagnan not really all that had occurred, but all that D'Artagnan himself knew. By putting together what fell from the lips of the young man and what was supplied by his own recollections, he was enabled to form a pretty exact idea of that position, of the seriousness of which the Queen's letter, short as it was, afforded abundant proof. But what most astonished him was that the cardinal, interested as he was that this youth should not set foot in England, had not managed to stop him on his way. It was then and on the expression of this astonishment that D'Artagnan related to him the precautions which had been taken, and how, thanks to the devotion of his three friends, whom he had left bleeding here and there upon the road, he had managed to get off with merely the wound which had pierced the Queen's letter, and which he had so terribly repaid to Monsieur de Vardes. Whilst looking to this account, given with the greatest simplicity, the Duke looked from time to time on the young man with astonishment, as if he could not comprehend how so much prudence, courage, and devotion could be combined with a countenance which did not yet show the traces of 20 years. The horses went like the wind, and they were soon at the gates of London. D'Artagnan had supposed that on entering the town, the Duke would slacken his pace, but he did not. He continued his course at the same rate, caring little for upsetting those who were in his way. In fact, in passing through the city, 2 or 3 accidents of this kind happened, but Buckingham did not even turn his head to see what had become of those he had knocked over. D'Artagnan followed him in the midst of cries which sounded very much like maledictions. On entering the courtyard of his mansion, Buckingham jumped off his horse and, without caring what became of him, threw the bridle over his neck and rushed toward the staircase. D'Artagnan did the same with somewhat more uneasiness, nevertheless, for those noble animals whose merit he appreciated, but he had the satisfaction of seeing 3 or 4 servants hurrying from the kitchens and stables and immediately laying hold of the horses. The Duke walked so quickly that D'Artagnan had some difficulty in following him. He passed through many saloons, magnificent to a degree which the most distinguished nobles of France could not even imagine, and came at last to a bedchamber which was at once a miracle of taste and splendor. In the alcove of this chamber there was a door in the tapestry, which the Duke opened by a small golden key which he carried suspended at his neck by a chain of the same metal. Through politeness, D'Artagnan remained behind, but at the moment that Buckingham stepped over the threshold of this door, he turned, and perceiving the hesitation of the young man, "Come," said he, "and if you have the happiness of being admitted into the presence of the Queen of France, tell her what you have beheld." Encouraged by this invitation, D'Artagnan followed the Duke, who closed the door behind him. They found themselves in a small chapel splendidly illuminated by a profusion of wax lights, and carpeted with Persian silk carpets embroidered with gold. Above a kind of altar and under a dais of blue velvet, surmounted by red and white plumes, there was a portrait of the size of life representing Anne of Austria, and so perfectly resembling her that D'Artagnan uttered a cry of surprise on seeing it. One would have believed that the Queen was just about to speak. On the altar and under the portrait was the casket which contained the diamond studs. The Duke approached the altar and, after kneeling as a priest might do before the cross, opened the casket. "Here," said he, drawing from the casket a large piece of blue riband, all glittering with diamonds. "Here are those precious studs with which I had made an oath to be buried. The Queen gave them to me, she now takes them away. Her commands, like those of heaven, shall be obeyed in everything." Then he began to kiss, one by one, the diamonds from which he was now about to part, but suddenly he uttered a terrible cry. "What is the matter?" demanded D'Artagnan in alarm. "What has befallen you, my lord?" "All is lost," said Buckingham, becoming as pale as death. "2 of the studs are gone, there are but 10. "Has your grace lost them, or do you suppose that they have been stolen?" "Someone has stolen them," replied the Duke, "and it is the cardinal who's managed it. See, the ribands which held them have been out with scissors. Has your grace any suspicion as to who has committed the theft? Perhaps the person still got them. Stop, stop, said the Duke. The only time I've worn these studs was at a ball in Windsor a week ago. The Countess de Winter, with whom I had been on cold terms, approached me during the ball. This appearance of reconciliation was really the vengeance of an offended woman. Since that day I've not seen her. That woman is an agent of the Cardinal's. What? Has he got agents then all over the world? Asked D'Artagnan. Oh, yes, replied Buckingham, grinding his teeth with rage. Yes, he's a terrible adversary. But yet when will this ball take place? Next Monday. Next Monday! 5 more days! It is more time than we shall need. Patrick! Exclaimed the Duke, opening the door of the chapel. Patrick! His confidential valet appeared. My jeweler and my secretary. The valet departed with a silent promptitude, which proved the habit he had acquired of blind and dumb obedience. But although the jeweler had been the first sent for, it was the secretary who, as he resided in the mansion, came first. He found Buckingham seated before a table and writing some orders with his own hand. Jackson, said he, will you go to the Lord Chancellor and tell him that I charge him with the execution of these orders? I desire them to be made public immediately. But, my Lord Duke, if the Lord Chancellor should question me about the motives which have induced your grace to adopt so extraordinary a measure, what am I to answer? That such is my pleasure, and that I am not obliged to give anybody an account of my motives. Is that to be the reply which he is to transmit to the king? Replied the secretary, smiling. If by chance his majesty should have the curiosity to inquire why no vessel must weigh anchor in a British port? You are right, sir, answered Buckingham. He will in that case tell the king that I have decided on war, and that this measure is my first act of hostility against France. The secretary bowed and departed. There, we may be quite easy on that point, said Buckingham, turning toward D'Artagnan. If the studs have not yet gone to France, they will not arrive until after you. How so? I've just laid an embargo on the ships at present in His Majesty's ports, and without express permission, no one will dare to raise its anchor. D'Artagnan looked with wonder at the man who thus employed in the service of his love the unlimited power with which he was entrusted by the king. Buckingham saw from the expression of his countenance what was passing in the youth's mind, and smiled. Yes, said he. Yes, it is Anne of Austria who is my true queen. At her lightest word I would betray my country, my king, my God. She desired of me not to send to the Protestants of La Rochelle the aid that I had promised them, and she's been obeyed. I forfeited my word, but of what consequence was that, whilst her will was gratified? Say, was I not nobly recompensed for my obedience, since it was to that obedience that I owe her portrait? D'Artagnan marveled at the fragile, unseen threads on which the densities of nations and the lives of men may sometimes be suspended. He was immersed in these reflections when the jeweler entered. He was an Irishman, but one who was most skillful in his calling, and who confessed that he gained 100,000 livres a year by the Duke of Buckingham. O'Reilly, said the Duke, conducting him to the chapel, look at these diamond studs and tell me what they are worth apiece. The goldsmith glanced at the elegant manner in which they were mounted, calculated one by one the value of the diamonds, and without hesitation replied, 1,500 pistoles each, my lord. How many days would be required to make 2 studs like those? You see that 2 are wanting. A week, my lord. I will pay 3,000 pistoles each for them, but I must have them the day after tomorrow. Your grace shall have them. You are an invaluable man, O'Reilly, but this is not all. Those studs must not be entrusted to anyone. It is necessary that someone should make them in this house. Impossible, my lord. I am the only person who can make them, so that no one could discover the difference between the new and the old studs. Therefore, my dear O'Reilly, you are my prisoner, and even if you wished to leave my palace now, you could not. Tell me which of your workmen you want, and describe the tools which they must bring you. The jeweler knew the Duke, and that all remonstrances would be useless. He therefore made up his mind at once. "May I inform my wife?" said he. "Oh, you may even see her, my dear O'Reilly," said the Duke. "Your captivity shall not be harsh, I assure you. And as every inconvenience should have its recompense, here is a present of 1,000 pistoles, beyond the price of the 2 studs, to make you forget the annoyance you may experience." D'Artagnan could not recover from the surprise which he felt at the minister, who made such a profuse use of men and millions. As for the jeweler, he wrote to his wife, sending her the order for 1,000 pistoles, and requesting her to send him in exchange his most skilful apprentice, and an assortment of diamonds, of which he sent her the weight and description, along with a list of the requisite tools. Buckingham conducted the jeweler to the chamber prepared for him, which was in half an hour converted into a workshop. He then placed a sentinel at each door with strict orders to allow no one to pass except his valet, Patrick. It need scarcely be added that O'Reilly and his assistant were absolutely forbidden to go out on any pretext whatsoever. This being arranged, the Duke turned to D'Artagnan. "Now, my young friend," said he, "England belongs to us too. What do you desire?" "A bed," answered D'Artagnan. "I confess that at present that is what I stand in most need of." Buckingham allotted D'Artagnan a room which adjoined his own. He wished to keep the young man at his side, not that he distrusted him, but that he might have someone to whom he could constantly talk about the Queen. An hour afterward, the order was posted throughout London that no ship would be permitted to leave the ports for France, not even the packet-boat with letters. In everybody's opinion, this was a declaration of war between the 2 kingdoms. At 11 o'clock on the second day, the diamond studs were finished, and so exactly imitated such perfect facsimiles that Buckingham himself could not distinguish the new one from the old. Even the most skillful in such matters would have been deceived as he was. He immediately summoned D'Artagnan. "Here," said he, "are the diamond studs, which you have come to fetch, and witness for me that I have done everything which human powers could accomplish. Rest assured, my lord, that I will truly represent what I have seen, but your grace gives me the studs without the casket." "The casket would only encumber you. Besides, the box is more precious to me now that I have nothing else. You will say that I preserve it. I will perform your commission, my lord, to the letter. And now," said Buckingham, looking earnestly at the young man, "how can I ever repay my debt to you?" D'Artagnan blushed even to the whites of his eyes. He saw that the Duke wanted to find some means of making him a present, and the idea that his own blood and that of his companions should be paid for in English gold was strangely repugnant to him. "Let us understand one another, my lord," said D'Artagnan, "and state the case fairly, that there may be no misconception. I am in the service of the King and Queen of France, and belong to the guards of Monsieur d'Essarts, who, as well as Monsieur de Treville, is more particularly attached to their majesties. Everything that I have done has therefore been for the Queen, and not at all for your grace. And more than that, perhaps I should not have taken a single step in the affair, if it had not been to please someone who is as dear to me as the Queen is to you." "Yes," said the Duke, "and I believe I know who that person—" "My lord, I have not named her," said D'Artagnan quickly. "It is true," replied the Duke. "I must therefore be grateful to that person for your devotion." "Just so, my lord, for now that we are about to go to war, I confess that I see nothing in your grace but an Englishman, and consequently an enemy, whom I should still be more delighted to meet on the field of battle than in the park at Windsor or the galleries at the Louvre. This, however, will not prevent me from executing every particular of my mission and welcoming death, if need be, in its accomplishment. But I repeat to your grace that you have nothing more to thank me for in this second interview than for what I've already done for you in the first. We say in our country, 'proud as a Scotchman,'" muttered Buckingham. "And we," answered D'Artagnan, "say proud as a Gascon. The Gascons are the Scotchmen of France." D'Artagnan bowed to the Duke and was about to take his leave. "Well," said the Duke, "are you going in that manner? But what course will you take? How will you get off?" "True. Egad, you Frenchmen stick at nothing. I had forgotten that England is an island, and that your grace is its king. Go to the port, ask for the brig Sund, and give this letter to the captain. He will take you to a small harbor, where you will certainly not be expected, and where few but fishing boats go. And the name of this harbor is St. Valery. But listen, when you are landed there, you will go to a wretched wine shop, without either name or sign, a true sailor's boozing ken. You cannot mistake it, for there's but one. And then you will ask for the host, and you will say to him, "Forward." What does that mean? It is the watchword which commands him to assist you on your way. He will give you a horse ready saddled, and will show you the road that you must take, and you will in this manner find 4 relays upon your road. If you please at each of them to give your address at Paris, the 4 horses will follow you there. You already know 2 of them, and to have estimated them as an amateur. They are those which we rode, and you may trust me that the others are not inferior. These 4 horses are equipped for the field. Proud as you are, you will not refuse to accept one, and to present the 3 others to your companions. Besides, they are to help you in fighting against us. The end justifies the means, as you French say, do you not? Yes, my lord, I accept your presents, said D'Artagnan, and, God willing, we shall make good use of them. Now give me your hand, young man. Perhaps we may soon meet on the field of battle, but in the meantime I hope we part good friends. Yes, my lord, but with the hope of soon being enemies. Be contented, I give you my promise that we shall. I depend upon your grace's word. D'Artagnan bowed to the Duke and hastened toward the port. Opposite the Tower of London he found the vessel to which he had been directed, and gave his letter to the captain, who got it countersigned by the governor of the port, and then prepared to sail immediately. 50 vessels were waiting in readiness to sail. On passing one of them side by side, D'Artagnan thought he saw the woman of Meung, the same whom the unknown gentleman had called my lady, and whom he himself had thought so beautiful. But thanks to the current and the favorable breeze, his vessel glided on so swiftly that in a few minutes it had left the others far behind. The next morning, about 9 o'clock, he landed at St. Valery. D'Artagnan immediately went to the appointed wine shop, which he recognized by the outcries from within. The war between France and England was spoken of as certain, and the joyous sailors were making merry. D'Artagnan pushed through the crowd, approached the host, and pronounced the word "forward." The host immediately made him a sign to follow him, went out by a door which led into the courtyard, conducted him to the stables where there stood a horse, ready saddled, and then asked him whether he needed anything else. "I want to know the road I'm to take," said D'Artagnan. "Go from this place to Blangy, and from Blangy to Neufchâtel. At Neufchâtel, go to the tavern of the Golden Harrow. Give the password to the innkeeper, and you will find is here a horse ready saddled." "Have I anything to pay?" asked D'Artagnan. "Everything is paid," said the host, "and most liberally. Go, then, and God protect you." "Amen," said the young man, as he galloped off. In 4 hours he was at Neufchâtel. Strictly following his instructions at Neufchâtel, as at St. Valery, he found a saddled horse awaiting him, and when he was about to transfer the pistols from one saddle to the other, he perceived that the holsters were already duly furnished. "Your address at Paris?" "D'Artagnan, Hôtel de Gardes, Compagnie des Arts." "Very good," answered the innkeeper. "What road am I to take?" demanded D'Artagnan. "That of Rouen. But you will pass the town on your right. At the little village of Écoix you will halt. There is but one tavern, the French Crown. Do not judge of it from its looks, for it will have in its stables a horse of equal value with this." "The same watchword?" "Exactly. Adieu, master." "A good journey, sir. Do you require anything else?" D'Artagnan said no by a shake of his head, and went off again at full speed. At Écoix the same scene was enacted. He found a host equally well prepared, a horse equally fresh and ready. He left his address as before, and departed in the same way for Pontoise. At Pontoise, he changed his horse for the last time, and at 9 o'clock he entered the courtyard of Monsieur de Treville's hotel at full gallop. He had got over nearly 60 leagues in 12 hours. Monsieur de Treville received him just as though he had seen him the same morning, only pressing his hand a little more warmly than usual. He informed him that the company of Monsieur des Essarts was on guard at the Louvre, and that he might repair to his post.